Welcome to your unfiltered guide to navigating the workplace as a Black woman, the Black Womaning in Corporate America podcast with your host, Nicole S. Palmer. I am the editor-in-chief and founding partner of Delnick Media, an independent publishing company that amplifies underrepresented and marginalized voices. This podcast was inspired by my best-selling book, Playing the Game While Black Womaning in Corporate America. Let's get into it. All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode of Black Womaning in Corporate America with your host, Nicole S. Palmer. Very excited. We have a very special guest with us today, and I'm super excited to have her on the show, Qiana Mestrich. And like I always like to do, I don't like to steal anyone's thunder, so I'm going to turn it right over to her to introduce herself to the audience. So, Kiana, thanks for being here and welcome.
Thank you, Nicole, and thank you to your podcast listeners for having me today as well. My name is Qiana Mestrich. I am an interdisciplinary artist working primarily within photography and photo-based mediums. I'm also I've had a 20-plus career in digital marketing, specifically within search engine marketing, working across in-house agency side, nonprofits, and primarily within publishing as well. So, yeah, that's a little bit.
Yeah, and that's so exciting and such a varied range of experience. Loving the publishing side because I'm also a publisher, so we'll have to probably talk about that later.
Right, absolutely.
But what I really would love, one of the things I love to ask all of my guests, because it's just something fun that I like to do, is their origin story. So I know we're here to talk about this fantastic exhibit that you have. But tell me what led you to pick up this medium. Like, what was your origin story that led you to where you are today?
Sure. Yeah, I'm formerly trained in photography. I studied photography both in high school. I started darkroom photography. I'm 48 years old, so I'm going way back here to the early 90s where I picked up black and white darkroom photography in high school for 3 years and then went on to study color photography in college at Sarah Lawrence for 3 years as well. And then, really when I graduated college, I was just looking to pay student loan bills and things like that. So I really, I tried to get into the art world, but it proved to be a little bit difficult for me in many ways. I wasn't seeing a lot of people that looked like me kind of working within photography, specifically women. It was very much a male-dominated field at that time. And so it was definitely hard for me to kind of break in. And I just got in early on in the dot-com era. I got into that work. And so that is really how I started my career within digital marketing, particularly starting with front-end web production, HTML coding, and things like that, content management, and then transitioning in 2008 to the SEO, search engine marketing side.
Okay, that's so you did a little bit of everything.
I've done a lot. I'm a multi-hyphenate, as they say.
Yes, exactly. That's what we're doing. We are all the things sometimes all at once.
Exactly.
So I was really excited to hear about the exhibit that you have currently on display.
Okay.
And so I would love for you to tell our listeners all about it, how it came to be, and just kind of really give us just all the deets like about the work and what you've done with it.
Yeah, thank you. The show's called The Reinforcements, and it is on view at Baxter Street right now on the Lower East Side in New York City. It is based on a body of work, a series of photo collages that I've been making over the last 2 years. And the collages really emerged out of this archive project that I was working on. I was in a program called the Magnum Foundation Counter Histories program in 2022. And I was working on this digital archive of women of color in corporate America. And I had applied to the program with a series of images from my own family's archive. My mother's from Panama, Central America, and she emigrated here in 1969. Following in the footsteps of some of her aunts who had emigrated here from Panama in the 50s. And so, these images are images of her working in her first office job. Her first sort of formal job when she got here was working in a perfume factory. And then she was able to get this office job through a friend of hers as she was learning English at the Spanish American Institute in Midtown in New York City. a Dominican woman, a friend of hers, said, I have this office job if you're interested in. So she was able to get that office job there, which she much more preferred than working in the factory because she wasn't, she was actually using some of the, the skills that she had learned. My mom didn't graduate college. I'm the first one, on her side, but, she was able to use a lot of sort of the clerical skills that she had received in high school, mostly. Yeah, this archive that I found in our family photo album, it's like 20 photos deep. And it's pictures of her in the office, and it's some sort of candid pictures and then some more formal pictures of her working. And they were taken by one particular photographer. His name was Nathaniel,
Mm,
and I'm still trying to find him. I can't find any trace of him online, but
mm.
he was a African American man who worked in the mailroom of that company,
Wow.
and he took these photos of my mother and a lot of her coworkers, and they're just really beautiful color, very 1960s, late 60s. This is 69 that he's taking these pictures. And my mom, just she loved the Supreme. She loved like all of the sort of Motown culture that was really popular in Panama in the 50s,
Yeah.
60s. So that was sort of who she fashioned herself after. And yeah, there's definitely a fashion element to it. And so I was inspired to look for more images like this, look for more images of women of color in the office space. And what I was finding was not a lot. I wasn't finding a lot of imagery within some of the digital collections I was looking at online. And during the program, someone challenged me and said, well, how can you fill in these gaps in history? And so, yeah, that's really how I started making the collages themselves.
Yeah, and I think that's such a critical point that you bring up is this lack of representation.
Exactly.
Unfortunately, even in the arts,
Mm-hmm.
that really speaks to who we are.
Mm-hmm.
Just even in a simple office setting. And we all know full well that we are the backbone of corporate America.
Exactly.
But unfortunately, a lot of times that makes us a bit invisible. And so it's very sobering, but not very surprising that you were finding all those gaps within that space. But
Mm-hmm.
I love that you have, like, you said this goes far back, the archive that you have, it's decades old, right?
Yeah, I was focusing in particular sort of post civil rights and in sort of the integration of the workforce in
Okay.
this country. It's
Yeah.
post 1964 to kind of early 2000s. I did, of course, find some earlier pictures, like women working in offices during World War II, but mostly kind of government.
Yeah.
I was really interested in, corporate America, the evolution of corporate America, and what is the role of Black women and immigrant women of color in corporate America, because I know, like my mom, I know there are other stories out there.
Yeah.
I grew up in New York City. I grew up riding the train, watching these women go to work every morning, wearing sneakers, with their nylon stockings and, changing into their pumps as they would get to work. And I grew up in the office space as well. My mom worked in publishing on Madison Avenue for 30 plus years. So I grew up around these women. So I knew that they were there. I knew that they existed. So, and that was just the little world of publishing within New York City, right? So I figured
Right.
there has to be, a multitude of images out there across the country for all the different sectors of industry, right? But yeah, again, lack of representation, even within some of the advertising that I would look at, of course,
Yeah.
primarily white women illustrated in these spaces.
Yeah, and I mean, unfortunately, it's like the default aesthetic, right? The
Yeah.
default is very white centric, non melanated, if we can say that. Of course, we can. That is really unfortunate. So I'm curious to know because, to your point, you essentially had to fill in those gaps for yourself.
Mm.
So, how did you go about doing that? I'm curious. And also, like, where did you go? Because you mentioned that you looked across the country. So, I'm curious to know where you went in that journey.
I didn't physically go anywhere, which is because
Yeah, virtually speaking.
exactly. Virtually speaking, I was looking across trying to, inquire across very corporate archives themselves because, there is such a thing as a corporate archivist in many large companies, especially companies that have existed for decades, centuries. I had already done a separate project. My first name is was a fabric created by DuPont, which is a large chemical company. So a lot of people don't know this. A lot of people know the name Kiana spelled with a K. A lot of people don't know the origin of the name as I spell it with a Q, Qiana. And it was actually, I was named after a fabric made by DuPont, a large chemical company that was started in this country in 1800. They started making gunpowder and provided
Okay.
the majority of the gunpowder for the Union Army during the Civil War. And then they went on to create various products, including nylons, polyesters, these fabrics that were, Kiana was a fabric that was used in
Wow.
the 70s primarily. It emerged in the 60s and was used primarily as a fabric in the 70s and disco era. So I had this sort of background of investigating or looking into corporate archives. I'd actually
Right.
traveled to DuPont for a separate project to their headquarters in Delaware and had looked through their corporate archives. So I kind of knew that a lot of these corporations have their own archives of everything about their products, all of their marketing materials, all of these various things. So I was kind of going off of that knowledge that I'd had and kind of looking for some of these corporate archives, but also looking at, national archives as well. A lot of the national archives have been digitized. There's a lot of photography available online, trying to also look at newspaper archives online as well. And yeah, also just looking within various platforms. So looking within Pinterest, looking within YouTube. I have a playlist of kind of YouTube videos that I'm curating as well of, a lot of it is like instructional videos around typing and kind of clerical work. But yeah, so just looking across various sources for some of these images.
I think that's so fascinating that this essentially began as a detective endeavor, right? Because I
It's
mean, you
definitely
really had to just do some investigative work.
yeah.
And that's so amazing to, it wasn't just a matter of displaying the art, but everything that went, that led up to that,
Hmm.
that you had to actually do a lot of deep diving across multiple platforms just to really capture and to find what you are able now to display. So that I think in itself is a story in and of itself. And I hope you write a book about it
It's
because
a
that's
whole
amazing.
separate story, yeah. And I would definitely love to do a book around this archive as well.
Yeah,
Separate from the collages that I've made, but around this archive, I would love to have some sort of book that kind of
yeah,
chronicles this history of women of color in the office space. And maybe it goes, earlier than, 1964, but I think that would be a great just sort of chronicle throughout the
absolutely.
decades.
I mean, I can even see this as a beautiful photography book, just to
Yeah,
have those rich images.
exactly.
And I think what's so powerful about this exhibit aside from the pictures themselves, which evoke such emotion, I
Mm,
think it tells our stories. And I think what we're finding, especially in this climate, in this day and age, our stories are being stripped away. And there's this concerted effort to erase
absolutely.
our stories.
Absolutely.
And it's so heartbreaking. But having people like you who are deliberately and intentionally ensuring that our stories are preserved is so powerful. And I'm grateful that you are sharing your story, that you actually took this upon yourself, because not a lot of us, unfortunately, have the desire or the ability to do that. So to be able to speak on behalf of those women that came before and to tell their story in such a powerful way is amazing. And I just want to acknowledge that just off the back. And I think that's powerful.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, no, I really feel like it's an important story to tell because, as I was saying, my mom came to this country following in her aunt's footsteps, and that aunt actually worked as a telephone operator at AT&T, Ma Bell. So, I grew up listening to about her career and how she had this great pension afterwards that she was able to live. And she really supported a lot of our family in Panama with that pension. So for me, it's
It's
also about
amazing.
like not only is it about the contributions of women of color, Black women in corporate America, to your point, being the backbone, but it's also a lot of these women they gained financial independence through their
Absolutely.
jobs, and they were able
Yeah,
to support, and they had to support not only their immediate family, but their extended families
absolutely.
with this work. So it's important to acknowledge those contributions as well, I think.
Yeah, and I think that something that you are teasing out that maybe we don't talk about enough is the immigrant stories that are part of that.
Yeah.
As a child of immigrants, as an immigrant myself,
hmm
I think that in itself is such a powerful story to tell because we don't always get to hear
No,
about the impact that immigrants have on the extended family and beyond. They
exactly.
actually help to support the economies of other countries
Exactly.
just by being here.
Yeah.
And that in itself, and especially in a time like this, where we are seeing a deliberate and concerted attack against immigrants,
Absolutely.
and which is completely terrifying and unfortunate. So that is in itself is it's so powerful because I think sometimes we forget that a lot of this country was built by immigrants. I mean, we know that
Well, yes.
first and foremost.
Forced immigration, but yes, absolutely.
So,
Yeah,
unfortunately,
yeah.
but also over time, I think we can sometimes forget or take for granted the fact that the immigrants really run, like they fuel this country. They are the engine behind
In
a
many
lot.
ways. In many ways, yeah. I mean, for me, it's not hard. It's not easy to forget just because I was born and
Absolutely.
raised in New York City, so it's like New York City is a story of immigration and
Yeah,
immigrants.
absolutely.
But yeah, I think it's worth noting, or it's worth spreading the word for sure.
Yeah. I'm curious to know during the 2 year journey to the exhibit,
Mm.
was there anything that either surprised you or that really just meaningfully impacted you that you discovered along the way?
In terms of the archive or the
Yeah,
of
or
the
even just
work,
the exhibit itself. I'm curious to know if there's anything that really you look back and just really left a lasting impact on you.
I think just, I throughout making the body of work, I've really been also, steeped in a lot of research just around the statistics around the role, how Black women are treated within corporate America, the lack of opportunities, the pay inequity, just all of the systemic forces that keep them within and keep us within a specific role. And there's an installation within the show in particular that's it's called The Broken Rung, and it's based on, I just discovered this book that just came out in 2025 from the McKinsey Institute. There are three women of color executives that wrote it. And it talks about this career advancement barrier, this career obstacle that Black women and women of color face, in particular, in terms of breaking into the managerial level.
Yeah.
And it's just really fascinating. And in many ways, kind of, it resonated with me as well because ever since having children, I have had very much a flat line in my career professionally, both from salary wise and both title wise. So there's also this sort of motherhood, penalty that happens
So yeah.
well for women. It's but particularly women of color are hit worse. I just kept finding, finding after finding, that despite the integration of the workforce in the 60s and even earlier than that, but at least the forced integration of the workforce, and despite the fact that here we are in 2025, we're still dealing with the same issues. We're still dealing with single digit numbers of women as corporate executives, Black women as corporate executives. We're still dealing with making two-thirds to the dollar compared to our specifically white male counterparts. And there's still a lot of just invisibility and lack of mentorship, lack of sponsorship opportunities. And it's for me, it's just I just keep asking why, and that was really the driving question for me. Like,
Yeah.
I think we all know why, of course, but
Yeah, unfortunately.
yeah,
And I think to your point that, and that's something we talk about a lot here, because when you see these patterns continue to repeat themselves,
Hmm.
you have to acknowledge that this is by design.
Yeah.
You have to at some point just call it what it is. Call out the elephant in the room. This is not an accident.
No.
This is not a coincidence. This is by design. This is why we talk about systemic racism, because it is baked into the fabric of
Of
this
this
country.
country. Absolutely.
So to your point, and I think, in even the sad part, when I even look at the numbers are so discouraging. Because when you think about even the pay equity, the wage gap,
Hmm.
and the prediction of when we may reach parity, not
Right.
in our lifetime, it's so incredibly infuriating.
Yeah.
But the reason why we continue to have this flat line is because it is intended to be that way.
Right.
And unfortunately, no matter how much we talk about it and we buck against it, until the powers that be decide that we are okay
Mm,
with allowing the true equity, true
mm,
parity,
hmm.
it will continue to be that way. So it's important that we continue to talk about it, because those who are coming behind us, the younger generation who
Yeah.
have all these aspirations, all these hopes and dreams, and then they realize, oh, I can't be everything I want to
No.
be. I can't, rise up the ranks. It's not just a given that if I work hard, I will be
Exactly.
rewarded accordingly.
Exactly. It has nothing
And
to do
I,
with ability or education. None of
unfortunately,
these
and I
things that we're
think,
all told that we need to be. Yeah.
yeah, and I'm hoping I can get out to see your exhibit before it goes away. Like, that is my hope and goal. Like, we'll see what happens. We'll see what we can make work. But I'm curious to know, have you gotten any reception? What have people said about your exhibit that have seen it so far? Like, let's talk to us about that.
Yeah, I mean, it just opened a couple weeks ago, but I've definitely gotten, just even in making the work and before the exhibit, I've definitely gotten a reception from other women, from other Black women, saying, this really resonates with me. This really reminds me of my mother, who
Mm,
worked, for many years, and I never really thought about the sacrifices that she had made, or I'd never really thought about her position as a woman in the office, or, it reminds me of my aunt, and,
mm,
that is what I really love because it's
yeah,
we rarely see ourselves, one, in the art world, period.
yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
so I love that this show is kind of creating a space for women of color to see themselves elevated in this way, both, kind of talking about corporate America, but also just, highlighting it within the corporate world. These are often worlds that don't talk to each other.
Right,
So unless it's like someone collecting art for their, again, their corporate archives, but or their own personal,
right.
investments. But yeah, I really, that was also sort of a surprise to me, but I really love that feedback because I feel like that's who the work is for, really. It's,
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely. And I love that, because I think in my journey now that I've written this book that is tied to this podcast, and that is what I hear about. And to me, that's the most powerful thing, is that women feel seen, Black women feel seen. They're like, I saw myself in these pages. And I think what you're bringing is so powerful, because, again, it's not only that you're telling the stories that need to be told, those untold stories, but you're allowing women of color, Black women, to see themselves
yes,
in a way that we don't usually get depicted. There's all these stereotypes that go on about who we
absolutely.
are. We're always being told who we are,
Right.
and we're not just allowed to exist and
Exactly.
just be.
Or
And
define our existence. Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. And so for you to have an exhibit that it's really showing just us existing
Mm.
and being who we are and contributing in such a meaningful way that we know we always have. And to really just elevate it, to your point, it's so meaningful and so powerful. So I'm going to do my darndest to make sure I get out there, because I definitely feel like the experience has to be very different and evoke something very different when you're able to see it in person.
Yeah.
And I would definitely love to see that for myself. Tell us, first of all, tell us the location, because we want folks to know where they can go. And we also want to know how long the exhibit is going to be available for.
Yes. So the show is on at Baxter Street, which is located at 154 Ludlow Street in the Lower East Side of Manhattan in New York City. And the show is going to be up until August 16th. So
Okay.
of this year. So quite a few couple months throughout the summer.
That's some time.
Yeah, this
Yes. You've got
to
some time to make
get there.
stuff happen.
Definitely. Yes.
So, I guess my other question would be, I'm curious to know, so the exhibit will be up until about mid-August. Are there any plans to perhaps take this somewhere else, maybe do a road show type of thing, maybe? What's the plan
Love to
after?
make this a traveling exhibit for sure. I mean, the work, the series of work itself is ongoing, so there will be more works to create, and there are lots more ideas for sure. You know,
Yeah.
there was a limitation. I'm using a lot of the female figures that I'm using in the work are
Mhm.
mostly from magazines, so there
Okay.
was a limitation there in terms of a specific beauty standard and a
Mm,
specific type, specific skin tones that have limited me specific body shapes. Like I would love to create more work that kind of embraces a more diverse set of
absolutely.
women. So definitely it's an ongoing body of work. But yeah, the next time it will be shown will be in January in upstate New York at a location called CPW, Center for Photography at Woodstock, which is actually in Kingston, New York.
Okay.
So, and then hopefully from there it will travel. There are no immediate plans right now, but this particular show was part of a residency that I did with Baxter Street. And so part of the residency is then having a solo show, and this is the product of that.
Hopefully, our listeners will help nudge that along because I
Hopefully,
would love to see something like this in the DMV. I think it's so needed, especially now in this climate. We need things to uplift us. I think we've heard a lot of negative things happening.
exactly.
We
Exactly.
need to start countering the narrative with something positive, something
Yes.
wholesome and meaningful.
Yes.
And I could absolutely see this becoming something that just is continuing to grow and evolve.
Absolutely.
Because again, like I said, we are the backbone of corporate America. That's just the bottom line. It's unequivocally what it is. We represent the workforce in the highest numbers,
Highest numbers. Yeah.
and unfortunately, the unemployment rate is hitting us the hardest right
It
now, which
is
is the
insane.
irony of that.
Such the well, not but not to your point, not unintentional, right? All of these sort of anti-DEI measures that our current administration are implementing are working. They're
100%.
yeah.
And it's interesting to me because when you think about who DEI benefits the most, white
Hmm.
women, and yet now with the pullback of DEI, it is disproportionately harming
Right.
Black women and women of color, again, by design. To be this surgical, but something that is supposedly
Hmm.
meant to benefit those who are underrepresented and marginalized. It is not accidental. It cannot be accidental. So, the final thing I would love for you to let our listeners know if they want to get in touch with you, tell us about your platforms. Of course, we're going to also put that in the description so no one has to worry about that. But let us know where they can find you. Maybe if you have any digital version of it's not going to be as powerful, guys, but still, any, some digital appetizers that folks can enjoy, please let them know where they can find that.
Sure, yeah. You can definitely there's an Instagram account that's tied to the archive that I was creating. It's at working WOC, so at working women of color. And that also will link back to my main Instagram account at Qiana Mestrich. And from there you can also get to my website. My website has a lot of sort of iterations of the various bodies of work that I've done within photography and photo-based collage. And that's just kianamestrich.com, QIANA Mestrich, MESTRICH.com.
Excellent. We are so grateful that you took the time to
You.
join us today. I think this is going to be phenomenal. I'm excited to hear from the audience and listeners how this impacted them. Certainly from our New York audience, because we are, definitely nationwide and international. So I would love to see folks that are going to the exhibit share that with us. And also, they might have questions. We might have to circle back.
Feel free, absolutely. Feel free to ping me, DM me. Definitely. I'd love to come back as well. This is definitely the audience that I would love to engage with most. So
We are so grateful to you, and we're looking forward to this being this is going to be a road show. We're just going to go ahead and claim
But
that.
yeah, definitely,
We're
definitely.
going to put that out there into the
Get into
atmosphere.
some
And
museums, get some, exactly, into some bigger audiences. Yeah. Thank you, Nicole.
thank you so much. Thank you for your time. Thank you to our audience.
Yeah. Good.
Well, thank you so much, Kiana, for joining us. Thank you to our listeners. And as always, until next time, take care.
Take care, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to Black Womaning in Corporate America, the podcast. If today's episode spoke to you, make sure to like, share, and subscribe, or submit a 5-star rating wherever you're listening. And don't forget to grab your copy of Playing the Game While Black Womaning in Corporate America, available now wherever books are sold. Until next time, take care.